being, I guess, fluent in English really helped me like think entirely differently about like just culture and like people in general. I guess like those people who took linguistics can tell you like, well, languages do affect how you think and all that. But what I feel is that you get like multiple sides to everything if you know like a different language, and you kind of have to have this like entirely new perspective to how to like approach things.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. I'm Dan Gable, Technology Manager for the LRC. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week, on Speaking of Language, members of Cornell University's student organization Language Expansion Program discuss the importance of language learning on campus in a comfortable, encouraging environment. Their weekly event, Language Corner, takes place at the Language Resource Center in Stimson Hall, room G27.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Today, I have two student board members of Cornell's Language Expansion Program in the studio with me. Erick Palma is a senior and LEP president, and Pippen is a junior and LEP publicity chair. Welcome to Speaking of Language, Erick and Pippen.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you guys here. So can you please share with our listeners, what is the Language Expansion Program? What do you guys do?
So the Language Expansion Program is a program that's part of the Cornell Public Service Center. First of all, it started back actually as a combined group with another organization called TIP, the Translator Interpreter Program.
Okay.
When there was a case in the Commons where there was a fire incident, and when help came, there were families that weren't able to effectively communicate what was going on, and there was a language barrier essentially. So that's when this was one of the first programs of the Cornell Public Service Center, and since then there's been several splits. For example, LEP and TIP became their own thing. LEP used to be called the Language Pairing Program. There's been several iterations where we've been trying different things throughout the past few years. But essentially what we aim to do is to create an environment for students to be able to talk essentially in a very casual way versus classroom environments or more immersed environments where there's a lot more pressure to have a certain level of language proficiency.
Got it.
So we aim in general just to have a good environment for people to be able to practice their language.
That's wonderful. So how long have you guys been involved with LEP?
I personally have been in LEP since sophomore year.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Pippen?
I think I first came like freshman year, but since I'm a junior, that's like 2-3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the events that you guys host? How do you engage students in language learning? And I know that at the LRC, we host the Language Corner on Fridays. So can you talk a little bit more about that and any other programming that you guys do?
Yeah, so our main event is mainly Language Corner, as you mentioned. That's an event that happens on mostly every single Friday. Again, to keep open the opportunity for people to be able to come and practice. We don't want to keep it restricted to only a few sessions throughout the semester. Language Corner is a sort of, as the name implies, each language gets into its own corner, you can call it. When we used to be in Willard Straight Hall, for example, we would set up, the couches there are set up in a way to where the couches are in one corner of the room, and then in a separate part of the room, there's different tables, and then there's like just different subsections. So transitioning here, we're trying to keep that same sort of environment. To where we split off people into different little tables and groups, and then people also just like come and go. The interesting thing about Language Corner too is the fact that there's multiple languages as well in one event versus just having one language and practicing with that, because often we get people who are interested in learning different languages or who are practicing several languages, and they also want to practice. For example, like they'll go one time and they'll practice Japanese, another time they'll go practice French. We have a G-Body member that knows 10 languages.
Oh, wow.
So for example, this is a very good event for him because he's very interested in a lot of different types of languages. And so this gives him the opportunity to be able to go around and practice every single one.
How many languages do you usually have represented on those Fridays?
It honestly depends on on the week, depending on when certain people are available. That's one of the main things. Again, we're all students and we don't always have consistent languages throughout the semester, depending on when it's heavier sessions or whatnot. But generally, we will have Japanese, French, Spanish. We have ASL this semester.
Oh, cool.
That's
fun.
From QDAP, which is another program part of the Public Service Center, which we started collaborating with and started coming to our events.
Like Mandarin
as well.
Might be worth mentioning that English is also something people practice.
Oh, cool.
So,
Of course.
For second language speakers.
And so is there one facilitator for each language, or is it just, you kind of raise your hand and you're like, hey, who wants to speak German with me? Or how does that work?
So generally when the semester starts, that's usually the hard part because people don't really know each other yet. But once the semester gets going, people know, people will start coming frequently. They know who's going to practice what. And so they'll just naturally get into their groups. And then when a new person comes in, we just ask them like, hey, they clearly don't know what's going on. So we just help guide them towards the language that they're trying to practice in.
Yeah.
That's how it usually goes.
Yeah, that's great. So why is this important? What's the benefit for some of the students who participate and just practice their language or maybe get exposed to a new language?
And for me personally, I was taking Spanish. I had no experience whatsoever prior to college. It was really hard for me to find people who wanted to speak this language with me outside of class. But especially in I think the first steps of maybe months and years of language learning, it's really important to have consistent usage of that language, not only with just reading textbooks or taking tests, but actually using that language actively in a conversational context, because somehow just speaking it feels a lot different. It's much more easier, I think, to get some things into your brain, just hardwire all these vocabulary, and you're like, oh, I can actually use this. I can actually talk to people. Yeah, because that's what languages are mainly for. And it was really beneficial for me to find this group of people who also wanted to do that. It's also a way to make friends with a common interest or a common language that you both want to learn or to practice.
Yeah, that's great. So can you share with our listeners a little bit about the language learning experiences that you personally have had? So Pippen, you just mentioned you started Spanish here at Cornell.
Yeah. So I think the most different part about Language Corner with other, because I also go to other events that help me practice Spanish. One of them was called this Spanish dinner thing, where there's basically this professor in the Spanish department. She would invite people over to Appel, the dining hall, and just over dinner talk in Spanish, and you eat. But that was I was under a very high pressure.
Yeah, because you're talking to a professor.
Right. First of all, there's a person of authority kind of there. Yeah. Everyone's really fluent, even though the email said people of all levels are welcome. But I had a really, really hard time actually engaging in conversation. I was mainly listening because I started 2 weeks and they were speaking in really really fast native speed, right? So I couldn't actively participate. But on the other hand, in Language Corner, there's usually people of really different levels, and it doesn't have to be because it's so casual. I feel it's also fine if you want to try to explain yourself a little bit in English or anything that. But in class or in some other events that's not not allowed. So it's much easier for me to just jump right in and feel comfortable about myself.
That's great.
Yeah.
What other languages do you speak?
In LC, I also do Japanese. Okay. That's also a language I've been learning for 6 to 7 years. But I can still, it still helps me to talk with other people. And I sometimes help other people with Mandarin, which is my native tongue. Okay. Yeah.
So multilingual. I like it. That's fantastic. Erick, what about you?
So Spanish was my first language. So that's where I started. And 3rd grade is when I started learning English. And so after that, I started taking English courses, maybe starting later into 3rd grade, 4th grade. And then since then, I didn't really take language courses up until high school. In high school, I started doing French.
Okay.
And so I had a friend in middle school as well. He was Japanese and he was going to move back to Japan. And because of that, like throughout high school, like I would still keep in touch with him. But at a certain point in high school, I was like, hey, maybe I'm gonna go to Japan. I'm gonna maybe go visit.
Yeah.
So midway through high school, I started learning Japanese. Because I also didn't want to be completely lost when I was in a different country.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah. So I started self-studying Japanese then, and after visiting, I just fell in love with the language, and also from taking French in high school, I just really enjoyed language learning and knew that was something I wanted to continue here at Cornell. So once I entered Cornell, I enrolled in Japanese. I continued that for a year and a half, and then I joined LEP. My schedule got really heavy, which is why I only did 1.5 years of Japanese.
Sure.
But I'm still self-studying even now, and I'm using language corners to be able to continue
That's
practicing
wonderful.
It's speaking. Yeah.
So what would you tell friends of yours who maybe are not currently learning a language? Why should they? Why is this important? Why is being knowledgeable about a different culture and knowing a different language, why is this beneficial? How would you convince them?
Mainly for me, I think it's really great to not only like it is a tool for conversation and like you can access more resources if you know a different language.
Yeah.
It also like really helps you think in a different way, I would say. So like for me, being like I guess fluent in English really helped me like think entirely differently about like just culture and like people in general. I guess like those people who took linguistics can tell you like, well, languages do affect how you think and all that. But what I feel is that you get like multiple sides to everything if you know like a different language, and you kind of have to have this like entirely new perspective to how to like approach things, which is really cool. Just kind of like an add-on to that I find really interesting is that since like memes are everywhere on Facebook, it helps you like read different memes, and all those memes actually really reflects how like people think in that language and that culture.
Sure.
Which is really interesting because like English and Chinese memes are entirely different. I suppose like other languages are too. So yeah.
The first thing that I would tell them is, again, language is like a way for you to be able to communicate with a whole different part of the world that normally you would not have any way of communicating with. So learning a language opens up that possibility. But also, so back at home, my El Paso, Texas, that's where I'm from. There's a lot of Mexican American families and Mexican families, and the border is right across. So you encounter a lot of situations where you sometimes also need to translate things in Spanish when you see people who don't know what's going on or very clearly lost. So there's also that aspect to it where learning a language also allows you to be able to assist others who have not really had the resources to be able to learn a language previously. So that's another thing. So that goes along with TIPS mission, for example, where they provide a translating and interpreting service for people who need that because they can't communicate across different languages.
Yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic. So can you tell our listeners, how can they get involved? Where can they find more information? Where can they find out exactly when and where Language Corner meets?
Okay.
You're the president.
So Language Corner, I mean, we post posters around campus. We have bookmarks. We were at Club Fest. So if you don't hear about us then generally it would be more up to someone else to like, for other people to like try to see. We also publicize on like the Facebook groups. So we try to have a social media presence as well. From there, we also, again, we have our listserv. We ask people to invite their friends who they know. We contact language professors as well to be able to share Language Corner with their class. That was actually one of the ways how I initially heard about it. I knew about the program freshman year when I signed up for like at Club Fest, but I didn't actively participate until my Japanese professors were like, hey, there's this thing called Language Corner. And then I had a few friends in there and they also told me to come. You know, it's like a lot of like word of mouth sort of thing. So we just try to get out there by contacting the appropriate people. Yeah.
And I may add to that on our LRC calendar, of course, Language Corner is listed as well. And we have some of the flyers sitting around Stimson Hall as well.
So in addition to not just the Cornell community, we're also open to the Ithaca community, again, because we are the part of the Public Service Center, and we aim to not just be in our own little bubble here, but also help out within the community as well. So this is also a service that is offered for any Ithaca residents that wish to come and participate. And we've actually had, for example, this semester, we've had a high schooler that's learning Japanese who has been coming consistently. And in the past, we've had older folks come in and practice their French and be able to pretty much go forward in their language learning. And
that's a great way to connect to the community at large here in the area. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks so much for the important work that you guys do and for joining me on the podcast. I think it's great that students are actively involved in supporting language learning on campus. So thank you so much, Erick and Pippen.
Thank you so much for having us.
Next week, Christian Hilchi will join us in the studio. Dr. Hilchi is a lecturer in the Department of Slavic and Eurasian Studies at the University of Texas in Austin. He will be on campus as part of our monthly LRC Speaker Series. All our Speaker Series events are live streamed, so please check out our website at lrc.cornell.edu for upcoming events. You can join us for Christian's talk titled Open Media and the Next Frontier in Open Education on Friday, November 16th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, either in person here in Stimson Hall or online via Zoom. And, of course, you can listen to next week's episode online as well. Until then, auf Wiederhören!
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu or look for Cornell LRC on Facebook and Twitter. Speaking of Language is produced by Sam Lupowitz and Dan Gable. Recorded by Sam Lupowitz. Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson. Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University. As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University. We thank our listeners and do stay tuned for our next episode.